management practices that are in common across industries and companies. And that's the challenge I have to offer you today. If we can share these common practices independent of your industry, you can take away some actions against these practices. So let me share a little story with you. After the book came out, I had the opportunity to interview a number of CEOs. And this one was sponsored by SAP. I had the opportunity to meet Marianne and Carol. And along the way, I received this side story from a call from USA Today. They said, David, I really love this Blueprint Company $1 billion thing. Could you update the list and tell me how many were founded and run by women? Well, I have 3 girls at home. So I went, woo, this is an interesting story. So I had to go back and I took the last 3 years of companies that went to $1 billion. I took the next 3 years of companies coming to $1 billion. And I found only one founder CEO pair of women who had grown $1 billion business. And it was the cover story of the Money section last May. And there was only one pair coming. Yet over half the entrepreneurs are women. So there's a gap. So another lesson for the men in the room, there's a huge untapped resource in women that will help grow more billion-dollar businesses, because you can see it. Now, in interviewing these, Marianne and Carol, who are right here, they took Percocet out from Merck, and it was a narcotic painkiller. If you've ever had an operation or a serious injury, you love Percocet. It's a narcotic. It makes you feel really good. It improves the quality of your life. And along the way, they got out of narcotics into painkillers for using patch technology when they acquired Liboderm. Yes, you can acquire companies to fill portfolio gaps in it, and it helps reduce the pain from shingles. So to put you in the front row seat of what I get to hear for the first time, this is their 3-minute discussion of their 7 essentials. And I would love for you to hear the language as they describe their story in the context of the 7 essentials. Marianne McDonald and Carol Ammon have What is the right pace of growth?
Secondly, it was very important that we had a board that understood the types of investments we were trying to make in the business for the long term. And they were a board that ended up being very long-term focused, allowing us to make the types of investments in the pipeline that would ultimately lead us to be able to drive revenue to what it is today. So that board composition was very important. And lastly, what was so important for us and really ended up being a huge benefit was that we were cash flow positive very early. Having the opportunity to buy an asset like Percocet that had great brand equity and cash flow, and then be able to recreate it in terms of life cycle management, allowed us to be cash flow positive and use that for our investments.
Marianne and Carol, thank you for sharing your story with us today. It does take a dynamic duo, a pair, to turn $1 million business into $1 billion business. So I listened to those stories time and time again, and I wanted to put you in the front row seat. So as you're hearing our panel today, you're going to hear similar lessons from different industries. Through hundreds of those interviews, we synthesized out common 7 management practices, and these are the 7 essentials. Now to jump ahead, we have developed a scorecard that's been translated into 8 languages, as I mentioned, and we've got thousands of companies in it, and invariably we find an average score. I treated this room as a company, and this is the average score for your 7 essentials. Red being a score of 1 or 2, 3 being average, yellow is like stoplights, and green is 4 or 5. The goal is to be performing above average in 5 or more of these 7 essentials. And the one that this room exceeds in is inside-outside leadership pairs, and we'll talk about that. And the one area that's almost universal in this room are the board of directors, being balanced with essentials experts, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that. 10% of this room is scoring 5 or more of the 7 essentials, and 10% of the room have an average score of red, and the 80% of the room is yellow. So if you can take as a goal 2 or 3 of these essentials and turn them into green, I promise you your growth prospects of taking those actions against your yellow essentials will improve your growth prospects. Universally, we need to talk about your board of directors because there's great leverage opportunities by taking actions there, whether you're private or public. Are your scores any different from the averages? Slightly, but very close. I find most companies end up not treating marquee customers and alliances as important as they should as a leverage opportunity, especially if you're trying to accelerate growth in tough times. And I'm here to tell you in advance, it's not going to cost you anything. It's about leverage of relationships, okay? In terms of what you're doing well universally, you don't need to spend a lot of time on this. There's a sheet in here, which is your summary of your scorecard, so you're not taking notes. This is your Essentials Scorecard summary for the room. And in there is your top 10. I'm just showing 5. And your top 5 are, you're taking action on active role and problem solving. You demonstrate the actions with a consistent set of variables. You're quick to self-correct. Your culture is based on innovation and exploration. And you are over-delivering on earnings year in, year out. And you're trying to reinvest in new product development. Those are the core strengths of the collective group of companies, which are very admirable. The areas for improvement and focus and actions that we're going to talk about today are getting a Big Brother Alliance partner on your board of directors, getting a CEO who's been through a high-growth company. So, quick point here is I found there are billion-dollar CEOs like Howard Schultz was on the board of eBay when they're very small. Charles Schwab was on the board of Siebel Systems when they had 0 revenue. You can do this. I've got billion-dollar CEOs on my board, and I'm a company of 1 at the moment, but I'm building a couple companies. If you've got a passionate opportunity, they're interested in making a difference. Now, if you're small at, say, 5 million, you might want to find a CEO who's grown a business to 50 million. When you get to 50, that CEO might move off the board and go find a CEO who's been to 150. Always find an executive who's grown a business in front of you. That's the point we're trying to make. Getting a community member on the board of directors. If you've got talent issues, probably want to have a community member on the board who's going to help you think through to recruiting talent. And somebody who understands and represents customer requirements. I'm going to talk to you about a customer advisory councils today because 80% of the companies that I've met over the past few years do not have their customers serving as advisory boards to them to help you grow your business. And my hypothesis is many of you probably don't. And one action item, put a note down. The number 1 action I want you all to take away, customer advisory councils. Number 2 action is board of directors. Just 1, 2, okay? And we'll come back to that. 7 essentials. How did I come up with them? If you reverse engineer the P&L of any business, your R&D or innovation investment is focused on delivering way better value to customers, higher order benefits. You know, in a more complicated term, we call it a breakthrough value proposition. A value proposition is defined as what value does it communicate or are you proposing to customers. It means that it has to be in terms that the customer understands, not the features or functions that you're trying to sell. If you invest in your R&D properly, there are 3 essentials to achieving compounding revenue growth, redefining a high-growth market segment, getting customers to sell for you, and leveraging alliances to break into new markets. And then, of course, you cannot sustain revenue growth without delivering compounding returns. Being cash flow positive early, a leadership pair, and your board of directors. It's a reinforcing business system. So number 3 lesson is that great leaders in leading forward who've grown growth businesses, whether you're at $1 million, 10 million, 100 million, or $1 billion, is they think of their business as a system. So how do you create leverage and reinforcing feedback loops between these 7 common